what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Tasting Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. We're on episode 118, and I don't know about you and what your schedule's like, but I'm enjoying a nice little 4-day weekend, actually.
No, actually, I'm working as we speak. On call for the whole weekend. It's my lucky weekend, so I'm technically off. I'm at home. I'm not out working or actively working, but at any minute I can be.
Now, do you is that like an oscillating thing? Do you have like a rotating schedule where you go some days or some weekends you're on call and some you're not?
Yeah, so right now we have it set up to where each of us have one weekend. Actually, our boss took 2 weekends, and then the other 2 of us took one. But as our department continues to grow, we'll probably all end up with just one weekend a month. So it ain't too bad.
No, not at all. Ours were kind of a result of parent-teacher conferences, because every year we have parent-teacher conferences twice. We have them in the fall, like October, I believe, so pretty early to start the school year. And then we have them once in the spring in February, and the one in February is always paired with President's Day. So what we do is we have our parent-teacher conferences on a Thursday night always, and we go to school, and then school for us ends at 2:30. So then starting at 3:00, we have our parent-teacher conferences. I know different schools, especially in different school districts in different states, do them completely different. What we do is we start at 3:00. So we end school at 2:30. Our parent-teacher conferences start at 3:00, and we have scheduled blocks every 20 minutes. So it would be one at 3:00, one at 3:20, 3:40, 4, 4:20, 4:40, 5, 5:20, 5:40, and we go until 9 at night. So that essentially constitutes as a full day in the contract. Therefore, it's considered working a 5-day week, and then we get off Friday. And like I mentioned, they always pair it with President's Day. So that way, then following Monday, we get off as well, which is nice for people, especially I know some of my colleagues planned, I don't want to say vacations, but mini trips out of state to be able to go on a little bit of a hiatus, since they have the 4-day weekend that's predictable, not like the 4-day weekends we have occasionally with snow days or anything like that. So.
Right.
But I'm so scheduled that I don't know if I could handle being on call like how you are. I think that would be tough for me.
You know what? I'm scheduled as well. Like not quite as scheduled as you, but it is a little difficult to get used to. I think being part of the fire department and having that ability to jump for a few years prior to this job made it easier. But yeah, it can be difficult to get used to for sure.
Well, I feel like it's, in a sense, it's almost like training. And I'm sure that, regardless of what it is, as well, especially if it's lifestyle and habit, everything that you do is going to be better served when you have a little bit more experience with it, and it becomes commonplace. So for you with the fire department, that's something that's been, like you said, it's been part of your day to day for years now. Which doesn't seem like that long, but it's surprising that it has been that long. And you get better at being a spontaneous person when you're forced into spontaneity due to emergency or whatever. And I mentioned one time, this was a while ago, I can't remember what it was, but you and I were talking on air about something, and I said that one of the things that I would like to do, and looking in hindsight, maybe I should have somehow formulated this into like a New Year's resolution. One of the things that I'd like to do is try to become more spontaneous. The only thing for me right now is it's very, very difficult to do that, not just in my personality, but in my day-to-day life. It's almost like you don't have room for spontaneous behavior or acts of surprise where you just decide to get up and go. Like, I'm one of those people where even if I just have to go to get my haircut or go to the grocery store, it's almost like I need to formulate a plan of when I'm going to be home, when I'm going to eat, how long it's going to take me, what time my appointment or whatever is at, or it's like a whole string of events that it's like a domino effect, because everything's pretty scheduled just due to being busy. So if one thing gets bumped out of place, or if one thing's 5 minutes behind, then what you're looking at again is that domino effect that kind of makes everything go 5 minutes behind. So it's really, really tough for me to be like that. But I think that I'm getting a little bit better when things pop up, just trying to adjust on the fly and go with it,
Right. I
But
tell you, it is nice once you get used to that. Once you get used to being able to fluctuate off of the schedule and not get, I had a tendency of getting harebrained, so like I'm a real schedule based person. And when I first started having to fly by the seat of my pants, so to speak, sometimes it would fluster the rest of my day. Like the activity that I had to do because of the spontaneity was okay, but the rest of the day or even the rest of the week, sometimes it would be bad. But once I got used to it, it was easier. It's been easier for me to figure out how to fit everything,
Mhm. Well, I think that like when you look at, there's a lot of self-sabotaging behaviors that people have, and myself included. We've spoken about it in regards to dieting. So not
I
necessarily
was getting ready
dieting,
to say that.
but like I mean that's the only comparison that I can make here. At least the first comparison that comes to mind is if you have someone that has a particular diet or a meal plan, or let's say they're just trying to lose weight and they have a bad meal, then there's so many people. Again, I've been guilty of this in the past as well. There's so many people that get off track for a bad meal and then use that almost as justification to rid themselves of responsibility the rest of the day in terms of their nutrition. So like, okay, I had this cheat meal for breakfast. Well, I'm off plan now, so I might as well just go the whole day eating like crap, which then elicits a negative or a little bit of a setback, so to speak. Now
Yep.
it's not going to be huge, but then people can kind of upscale that where, oh, I had a bad day on Friday, so I might as well just have a cheat weekend and I'll just go
Yep.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then you get into that type of behavior where you self justify through self sabotage. And it becomes a slippery slope because that's how a lot of people lose progress. So I'm sure that it can kind of be the same way with schedule things. Like if you have a to-do list and you get a little bit behind on the to-do list for a particular day, then it can be very easy for someone to say, you know what, I'm already behind. I'm not rushing around to speed up. I'll just do this tomorrow or do this next week or whatever. I see those behavior patterns a lot. And I try to always be fully transparent and look myself in the mirror and be real with people and say that I'm guilty of those as well. I do those from time to time for sure.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. But, because whenever you're dealing with people that need to like talk about that, right?
Mhm.
So some people like myself, especially like whenever I first started dieting, I needed that whole, hey man, it's okay to mess up one meal. Rome wasn't built in a day, but let's not throw the whole week or the whole day or the whole month away because of one meal. And when you can admit that you're, like you just said, like you're guilty of it sometimes as well, it helps other people, trickle into that mindset that, okay, that was one meal, check, moving on.
Yeah. And I think something that's interesting is when you and I talk on the podcast specifically, but just in general, when we talk daily, the whole premise behind the podcast was to find traits that successful people have that align with other successful people. So, what are some commonalities between all successful people? And one of the things that I feel like we've discovered too that is the opposite of that, but also an important part of the equation is what do failures do? So, people who constantly fail, or people who don't make progress, or people who are not living their best lives, what type of behavior patterns do we commonly recognize in them? And certainly to the point we alluded to is self-sabotage through a self-destructive behavior when something goes awry, like one little thing
Yeah.
essentially creating a mountain out of a molehill. And I don't know if that's a psychological thing, like due to anxiety, or maybe it's just almost self-rationalization, because honestly,
I was getting,
that's one of the downfalls to I feel to knowing a lot about nutrition. For example, we'll just stick with that comparison. Is it's very very easy to basically it's easy to justify anything to yourself. Like I can rationalize any nutritional choice that I make in my own head, even though it's truly
right.
not what I need to be doing. I could make an argument that it is what I need to be doing.
Right. Yeah, I can definitely see that. And it is hard. The more you learn, I find that the more you learn about a particular subject Whether it be weight loss, strength building, or anything down to business, or leadership, or how to grow a garden, any things like that you learn a lot about a particular subject. And then when you have a failure in that field or in that area, it's really easy for you to self-diagnose and justify, like you said, like make that self-justification. Oh, well, this is why we'll just, it's okay.
Yep.
And that's something that, like, I have a hard time explaining, because I tell people all the time that I like the failure, like, especially like in the gym, when over the last 3 weeks, I failed at a particular movement for a top set for a bench press. And it's been driving me crazy, but I enjoy that because it gives me something to work for. But I'm not that way in every world, in every realm, like I'm struggling with some digestion issues or something going on right now, where we're not going down. The diet's the same. Strength markers are going up, but the weight's not coming down. So I physically am struggling with that. And if I wasn't able to talk to somebody else about it, I think I would really struggle even more.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I guess that's where I'm at with it, with a lot of these topics, is until you're comfortable with mastering whatever it is that you're trying to master, try to always keep somebody around that you can bounce your ideas off of, because you can get trapped in your own mind, like in that self-justification or that self-sabotage.
Yeah, man, the failure thing is really, really, really tricky, because I feel like you and I have had several episodes in the past where we've talked about failure, obviously, and almost taken different stances on it. One week, and it can be a week to week thing. One week we'll say we love failure and you need to analyze it and welcome it. And then very recently we talked about failure and said that you need to have a certain degree of disdain and disgust for it. Otherwise you'll get too comfortable. Like it's a really, really thin threshold between welcoming failure and being not necessarily afraid of it, but just having the utmost, disgust with it. And when I look at failure, it's this weird balance. Yeah, man, it's just this weird balance of like, I have to make sure that I use failure as fuel, and I welcome it because it lets me know where I'm at. But just because it happens doesn't mean I need to get comfortable with it.
Right. And that's something that, like, I struggled with for a long time, was I think I started to get comfortable with, all right, this is just going to happen over and over and over again. So, we're just going to ride it out where we're at. Mm-hmm. Instead of taking the route of like digesting that and really chewing on the reasoning behind it and moving forward and trying to fix it.
Yeah.
It just like you said, it was constant. It was a constant thing where I got too comfortable.
And sometimes I think that failure, regardless of if you use it positively or if you use it negatively, I think both of those things, regardless of what benefit you get from failure, it's important to not be dismissive of it quickly, because both of those, again, whether you're using it for positive or using it for negative, both require you to be reflective upon it. So don't just fail and then go on to the next thing. Now, the scaling thing, or the scaling aspect of failure, comes with what your perception of failure is. So like if you're a quarterback and you throw an interception in a football game, you're always taught to have a quick memory. That's something that you shouldn't look long-term towards. But when you have bigger degrees of failure, I think it's really important to like ruminate on them, because you're going to get both the positives and the negative aspects of it. Like something that comes to mind, and I'm sure I've talked about it on the podcast before, was 3 of my athletes who happened to play for the same softball team in West Virginia. They lost in the state title game, and they had an undefeated regular season, just demolished their way through the postseason up until the state final game. And they were up 5-0 in the 5th inning of a 7-inning softball game. They were up 5-0, I believe, or 5-2, and ended up losing. So when they lost, I obviously gave the 3 girls some space and didn't message them right after the game because they needed that kind of like emotional cascade to kind of overtake them and then let it clear a little bit and let it buffer out. And then after a few days, I messaged him and we talked pretty at length about failure and how my opinion on failure is different. And I told them that what's going to happen is when they get back home and they get back to school, everybody's going to tell them to forget about it and put it in the past. Because at the time, two of the girls were sophomores and one of the girls a junior. And they have so much ahead of them, all three of them. One of them is committed to play Division I softball. The other two will play Division I softball eventually when they're of age. And they have so much ahead of them and they just need to put this in the past. And that's what everybody in the community is going to tell them. It's what their classmates are going to tell them. Just forget about it. You still have the oldest one has one more season. The other two have two more seasons. You guys have so much talent returning. Virtually your whole roster is coming back. You need to put in the past. And I told them that I think they need to take a different route of that because that can be used as an unrelenting fuel for them for the rest of their high school careers. I told them, don't ever lose sight of how bad that felt to blow a lead in the last two innings and lose the state championship game. Like that's something that you need to think about every day when you're at practice. You need to think about it every day when you're at training with me. You need to think about it every day when you're hitting with your private coaches or pitching with your private coaches. Every day that you don't want to get up early to work out, every night that you'd rather just go home and skip batting practice, all those things that you don't want to do, you need to remind yourself how terribly awful and heartbreaking and overwhelming that loss and that failure was, and use that and never let it happen again. So I think that the point stands, whether it's a negative feeling or looking at it reflectively. I think that you just do need to let whatever the failure is, you need to let it hang around for a little bit. Like for me, when you talk about like the bench press, I'm one of those people where one of the things that I think that I do well is I have a pretty good perception of self, whether that's my personality or my intellect or just my character or my moral compass. And then of course my physical traits too. So like in the weight room, I know what I can and what I can't do. And very, very rarely do I fail. But in recent years, I think that that's hurt me because I've never pushed myself to the point where I've actually failed to lift. And I'm talking about because of the weight was too heavy, not because I went to failure, like I did too many reps, because that happens frequently. But I mean, I've never tried a weight and not gotten it. And I think that that's something that's been restrictive for me. So recently, much like yourself, I failed at a particular lift and it kind of bothered me for a little bit. And I allowed it to bother me on purpose. Like I thought about it throughout the week. And then lo and behold, the next week I came back in, actually less than a week. It was 4 days later, came back in, performed the same movement. Not only did I get it for one, but I got it for two and almost got it for a third one. So I almost got it for 3 reps after having failed it the time before. But I guarantee you, if I never would have failed that weight, I never would have gone back to it or done it. And if I wouldn't have kept that in my mind throughout the 4 days, I wouldn't have gotten it. I don't think. It was the fact that I was so upset about it and I let it be pretty consuming. And if I was full and didn't want to take another bite of my meal, or if I was tired and didn't feel like getting up early to go to the gym or whatever, I kind of used that as a little kick in the butt to make sure that I got it done. So I think that failure is something you do need to ruminate on.
I was literally, that was the word I was gonna say. Ruminate in the world of that failure, and let it fuel your future success. And
with all that, you also have to be like a self-reflecting person and not let, like you and I are both pretty, I think we have a good outlook on things. So we're not going to let it consume us to the point where it would be overbearing, because obviously this conversation that you and I are having, people can take this too far and let it consume them and deteriorate them.
Right, exactly. And you know what? Honestly, I like to think that I am that way, where I won't let it destroy me. But certain areas, it definitely does. I definitely have the ability to let it go too far at times, with like mental health and stuff, because, you know, it's like I get really hard on myself, especially like right now because of the backslide that I've had. The biggest failure that I've had in the last few years is the backslide in weight. And, you know, you look back at stuff from 2 years ago and it's like, man, how did you not just maintain that? Like, because it was so hard and it was so worth it. But I'm working through that. And I think that's important, is to develop ways for yourself to work through your issues. And I don't even know how to say it, but like, develop your own methods to dissecting the failures. And like you said, being able to use them as fuel for the next effort or for the next endeavor.
I think when you look at failure, it's important to have a system. So a system of how you analyze it. How long do you hold on to it? How do you use it as fuel? How do you allow it to not overconsume you? And I think with all things, and that would be a really good transition into a commercial break for us, because I think that coming back, we can talk about systems, because that's one of the things that I've been pretty adamant on in my own world, is creating better and more efficient systems for success. So that way I can have sustainability in the things that I do. And I know you and I have had a bunch of conversations like that. So let's go to a quick commercial break and we'll talk more about that when we come back. As listeners of the Chasing Dreams podcast, we know that you demand the highest quality at all times. If you're interested in quality, look no further than Beast Mode Baking. Beast Mode Baking aims to bring the highest quality, creative, and of course delicious baked goods to your home with nationwide shipping. All orders need to be pre-ordered to ensure they're packed fresh and shipped out to you as soon as possible. Beast Mode Baking offers a flat rate of $15 for shipping due to the size and weight of the cookies and doughs. So if you're interested in Beast Mode Baking, please contact CEO Shannon Knorr. That's at SKNORR13 on Instagram, and order your delicious baked goods today, because every time you support them, you're supporting the podcast as well. And we are back from our commercial break. All right, Justin, prior to the break, we talked about having an important system and something that you follow in your day-to-day goals and activities to that way ensure that you have success. And I remember, goodness, taking us back about a year now, when we set last year's New Year's resolutions, and I was a little bit broad with mine. And I vaguely said that one of the things I wanted to do was continue doing everything that I'm doing, but be able to upscale it and have a better system in play for all of my occupations. So when you talk about training, for example, you have only so many hours a day that you can only train so many people. So I needed a better system. How could I train more people in less time and still give them equal, or if not greater, value than they were receiving with me previously? And then when we talked about failure in the first half of the episode, we talked about you need a system with how you analyze failure, because you can't get too caught up in it, but you can't be too dismissive of it either. So when I think about like everybody who is involved in fitness that has success, most of these people do a very good job of prioritizing and executing, which is just all part of their system. Like, you know firsthand how important it is to get into a routine. So I think that system and routine can work synonymously here, you know?
I agree. And I guess the first step to my system is establishing a time frame that you're going to execute a task, and then making that a, not, you know, going back to the early days of the podcast, making that one of the non-negotiables.
Yep. I think that,
you know, that's really
very,
that's
very
like
important.
Yes.
Just in any regard, because like for me, I know that when you have a lot of stuff going on, it's very easy to be haphazard in how you approach them. So, okay, I need X, Y, and Z done by the end of the week. Well, if I get X and Y done, maybe A, B, and C will pop up before I get to Z. So if I don't set a deadline on Z, maybe I can start working on A first. And your mind can kind of pull you in multiple directions of things that you want to accomplish. So I think that not only having a time frame in terms of the day-to-day, like I'm going to do this from 9 to 10, I'm going to do this from 10:30 to 12 or whatever. I think it's also important to have long-term deadlines for everything, or short-term deadlines, because at least for me, that's how I've noticed my greatest accountability is when I set deadlines and stick to them.
Absolutely. You know, I think a deadline is an amazing tool to use, especially once you figure out what your capabilities really are. And I don't mean like your comfortable capabilities, but like once you figure out where can I actually, how hard can I push this machine? How hard can I run it before it breaks? And then set your deadline, because now you know exactly what the breaking point is and you have a really good idea. Because like I found, like, to go back to last year's New Year's resolution, I wanted to bench what I think I said 405 last year. Well, I didn't know my breaking point. You know what I mean? So that wasn't a realistic goal. It wasn't a realistic for my system. But now that I have another year under my belt, it's easier to say, okay, that's definitely going to take some time, but we can set smaller goals, backstop, so to speak, on the roadmap. So if we get off pace, we can get right back on track.
Yeah, for sure. And I've done both schools of thought, because you have another camp that I don't want to say is anti-deadline, but there's a group or a growing contingency of people in terms of coaching success is trying to stay away from deadlines and just focusing on the process and not the end result. Now, I can tell you from firsthand experience, and this is just me, this is not anybody else, just my own personal opinion with my own goals, is that if I focus on the process and not the end goal or not the end deadline, it works, but sometimes I move too slowly, whether I realize it or not.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. You know, we've talked about that numerous times, where if you don't have, like, using, your situation, for example, if you don't have a show in mind, it's easy to, well, I don't have a show. So like, it's easy to make that plan extend. But, once you iron out a definite, you have no choice but to succeed.
I agree. I think that when you look at that model, though, it's important to recognize that there's going to be so much variability person to person with that. So I think that there are some people
Right.
who flourish in a landscape where they don't have any deadlines and they can focus on the process, because maybe for you and I, maybe deadlines elicit some response of urgency, but for other people, that can be like anxiety inducing.
Yeah. Okay. I can definitely see that.
So I think that everybody, that's again, one of the difficult parts of a podcast and trying to coach success or understand success is it's very difficult to make concrete, solid rules with people, because everybody is so completely different that the person to person is going to be highly variable,
I think the only concrete and solid rule when it comes to like the world of success is to have an intense mindset.
Yes, I think intensity,
whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I don't even know. There's probably some other synonyms along with intensity that people may be thinking about. Intensity or passion or any of those words that like have a lot of want to behind them, I think.
Yeah. So I was going to say savage, because that's one of my favorite, like, words to like describe something, is be savage. But, some people take that as a negative, and I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean, but just have that fire, always have something in mind, something, your goal, your end game, whatever your thing is, have it somewhere in your mind that you can access that. So you have that intensity to get it. And then that's when you start building your plan, whatever it is. If it's for work and you want to be a successful business person, or if you want to be a successful family man or successful in the gym, you have to be intense about the whole process.
I think the other one that you could tag in along with that. So the first concrete rule would be being passionate and intense and having a lot of, we have some differing views on this word, but some motivation, long lasting motivation, because motivation can be fleeting.
Yes.
Talked about before. So you have to have a lot of passion for something or intensity for something. And then the other concrete rule I would say that almost all successful people need to have to some degree would be being analytical and self-assessing. So if what you're doing isn't working, you need to understand that. And then you need to analyze why it's not working. Or conversely, if something you're doing is working, understand what aspect of it is accounting for the success. Why is this working? What exactly about this training program? What exactly about my financial situation or about the way I do my job? What exactly is accounting for this being a successful endeavor for me? So doing something with a lot of intensity and then being reflective enough to know if that intensity is working or not, I think are the two concrete rules that you and I have seen thus far for sure.
Absolutely. And then everything else kind of can fall into place and be moved. I mean, I think all the Monopoly pieces need to be used. All the Legos have to be used to build the project, right? But those are like the two foundational pieces. It's like the flat table and the directions
Yep.
to build anything out of blocks or puzzle pieces or X, Y, and Z. And then everything else is just the pieces. It's the roadmap. You just have to self-assess, make changes, and give it time.
Yeah. And then you can go down all the Lego pieces in different umbrellas. So what type
Right.
of what is your mental state? Because the mental game of this success plan is so different from person to person. Or the atmosphere game. Some people have found success because they've been around it their whole lives. So they have a really, really good support system and they have a good caring family and they have a lot of resources. But then you have other people who find success because they have nothing and they have no other option but to get out of the current situation they're in where they have no resources, they have no family, or they have no support system. And that is ultimately what fuels them beyond anything that you and I can comprehend. So I think that all the, like you said, all the other Lego pieces, I like that analogy, all the other Lego pieces are going to be used to some degree, but the types of pieces you use may be different from person to person.
Right. Exactly.
I like it, man. I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up the episode for tonight. I mean, we kind of hit on a couple different things and ultimately found our way back to failure versus success and kind of looking at what concrete evidence or what not necessarily evidence, what concrete foundational cornerstones do successful people need. Thus far over the 118 episodes, you and I have definitely found that intensity is one and analytics are another.
I agree. And I'm so, I wanted to say, at some point in this episode or the next episode, how grateful I am for the people that listen regularly. And then all the successful people or up and coming successful people that are excited to be a part of the show. It's humbling for sure.
Yeah, definitely makes us feel welcome and worthy and all of the other good things associated with that. So with that, we have come to the end of another episode of the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. This has been episode 118. As always, we appreciate your listenership and we look forward to hearing back from you guys next week.